me get my music stopped for a quick second. There we go. Hello, everyone. I am Lonnie Hobbs Jr., Marketing Research Director for Kansas Black Farmers Association. Wanted to welcome you to another one of our KBFA webinars. Today we have a good friend of ours, Ms. Kerri Ebert, that'll be talking about grant writing. Just before we get started, a few household etiquettes. So this is a webinar style, so only the host and co-host will be able to unmute themselves. However, you do have access to turn your camera on if you like. Any messages sent in the chat will be sent to the host and co-host as well. So we can just kind of monitor this session, make sure everything runs smoothly. But like I said, you are in for a treat. Before I turn it over to Kerri, I am going to pass it to KBFA's Program Director, Mr. Justin Howard. So Justin, take it away.
I'm mute. Okay, good evening, everyone. Glad you guys can join us this evening. I just wanted to, again, thank Kerri for providing this opportunity for us. This will also be posted on our social media and specifically YouTube later, so let people know, because this is a great opportunity for our network and we're just excited to dig in. And I also wanted to thank you, Kerri, for being willing to host this webinar so late in the evening, but we know that that was for people to be able to join after work and such things. So special thanks to that. And we see people hopping in now, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Lonnie and Justin, and welcome everybody. I am going to make a guess, but I'm going to ask the question before we start. How many of you have grant writing experience? You can just put it in the chat, or yeah, if you want to turn your video on, but if you want to put in the chat, if you have, how about if you put in the chat if you've got a whole lot of grant writing experience, then we'll just skip the whole evening and we'll just chat. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much time waiting for that chat to
I don't think we have too much
blow up on us.
here.
Yeah, so I think we should just dive right in. And so I am going to share my screen and we'll get started. And part of the rules for tonight, at least for me, are if you've got a question, go ahead and put it right in the chat as you think of it. You don't have to wait until the end. We're a cozy enough group that we can, if something comes to your mind, while I'm talking about it and you want to stop and talk about it further, I am more than happy to do that. And we'll still stay on time schedule. So you can get out of here while it's still daylight during our daylight savings time. But so yeah, thanks Lonnie and Justin and Kansas Black Farmers Association for having me here tonight. And we're going to cover we're going to cover grants in general. We're going to do some basics here first about grants, what they are maybe and what they aren't, and some of the terminology that you need. And then we're going to move into more specifics about the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education grants. So with that, I'll tell you who I am, because so you'll know why we're focusing on on specific types of grants. So I work for K-State Research and Extension as the coordinator for the Kansas Center for Sustainable Agriculture and Alternative Crops, and also the Kansas Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program. And that the initials are SARE, and you'll hear me refer to it as SARE quite a bit. So if you hear that funny word, it doesn't make any sense. It's an acronym, and we'll get to that part, the SARE part of this a little bit later. But first, I really want to focus on a few grant writing tips. And actually, my whole presentation kind of changed this morning. I was on a phone call with a Kansas farmer who has been trying to write grants for quite some time, and he has received a few for a new agribusiness. And his problem was, now that he has the grants, how to manage them. And he wanted me to be sure and tell people it's not easy to get a grant. So I'm going to start up front. Grants aren't easy to get. If they were, we'd all have grants, and the world would be happy. So I guess that's rattling in my head. It has been all day, and it's like, how do I work this in? But just, I don't want to scare you off, but this isn't the simplest way to get funding for your farm. But let's dive right in real quickly here, because I shared these with Justin. He knows I have a whole mess of slides that we'll fill time or not. They are not all mandatory for sure. So let me figure out how I'm going to advance my slides. There we are. So this is what I would like for you to know by the end of this session, is that, what is a grant, some commonly used grant terminology. Hopefully I'll be able to give you some tips that'll help you be more successful with grant writing, if we find one that'll work for you, and then where to look, because that's one of the hardest parts, is where do you find this kind of extra funding, and they're well hidden as well. So we'll start at the very, very, very foundation of it all. So what's a grant? It's money. It's money that is given without any expectation of it being returned, but it doesn't come without strings. And so you're given the money without, to spend on a project that you have outlined in a proposal. We'll get to some of those terms, but basically a grant is money you don't have to pay back. So typically grants are awarded to nonprofit organizations and government entities like schools, universities. We all hear that about universities. Oh, this grant and that grant, and how the university, especially K-State, every university is relying more and more on grants. It's hard to find grants that are available to individuals. So that's just, I want to put that out there at the beginning. It's not impossible, but it is kind of hard to find them. But the process is all the same. And as I said earlier, the money doesn't have to be repaid. It's not a loan. It's money that you have. But among those requirements are the fact that by receiving grant money, or by actually writing the grant up front, and then hopefully, if you're successful receiving the money, you're helping some other entity achieve their goals. So somebody writes up the parameters for how what their goals and objectives, what their mission is, and then maybe they don't have the capacity to do that, or they're good Samaritans and they want others to do it. And so they offer money that they have in their pockets to others to help them, the funder, achieve their mission. And so you're actually working to help someone else achieve their mission. Ideally, both of your missions line up, and it's a win-win for everybody. So some of the terms that you'll need to know that I just want you to be a little bit familiar with, because as with any specialized industry, grant writing and grant making is very specialized industry. There are a few terms that get thrown around and we don't always know what they mean. So, your grant maker is also the funder. That's the source of the money. And if you're writing the grant, then you are the applicant, or you might be called a recipient by that grant program, or some people say you're a grant seeker, but you're the people who want the money, who are going to get the money and put it to work. The grantee is this applicant who is successful. You get the money, you become a grantee, not an applicant. Another term that's really important is this RFA or RFP or CFP sometimes, and that's the request for proposals, a request for applications. A CFP would be a call for proposals. Different terms, they all mean the same thing. It's the rules for the grant program that tell you what the funder is looking for, how to put that grant together, and how and when to submit. So there's also, once you're successful, there would be an agreement drawn up between the funder, the grant maker, and the grantee, or the recipient of the funds. And it is a contract between the funder and the recipient of the grant, of the money, that you're going to do what you said you were going to do in that proposal or application, whichever it is that they call. So the proposal is a written application that has all the information in it that was that was outlined in that request for proposals, or the RFP. Some grants require require the recipient to come up with a portion of the funds. Those are often called matching grants or challenge grants, where the funder will give some money, but the recipient also has to come up with some money. And there are usually criteria for that. For example, with the federal government, sometimes the federal government requires a match, but it can't be federal dollars. So you have to find a match that isn't another federal grant, for example, or someone, or if you're matching with someone's time, they can't be an employee of the federal government, something like that. But that match, if you see the word match, that's what that means. It means they're looking for you to come up with other funding. And that usually is a percentage of your project budget. So, it could be 50%, it could be 10%. It varies by from proposal to, or from from RFA to RFA, but it's a word that you need to kind of look for. Deadline, probably the most important word that you can search for in a request for proposals, and that is the date. It used to be a postmark date, and now in the world of electronic transmissions, they look for a date and time stamp, and it's a lot harder to fudge a date with a date and time stamp. So always look, if you find a proposal or an RFA that you think you are interested in, I would suggest going to the deadline first, making sure you can meet the deadline that they have. So, some grant makers give you lots of time, others not so much. So the deadline becomes really important. A progress report and a final report. What do those mean? Some funders will ask you for a report midway through your process. So you are a successful grant writer, you've received the grant, and they're going to want a project report. Maybe that, if it's a 2-year grant, then they want that project report after the first 12 months. And then pretty much every grant will ask for a final report where you document what you did with all of that funder's money and all of your time that you put into that project you were working on. And you have to submit that. Some funders will also withhold money until they get those reports. Not all the money, but they'll withhold a portion of the money, and that's common. So reports are very important because that's how the funder knows that they made wise use of their funds by investing in your project. So we'll move on to, what are the components, in general, components of a grant. And ideally, you want to start with a summary, whether or not the call for proposals asks for it or not. it's really good if you can turn your project into an elevator speech. You know, if you can write 1 or 2 sentences that give an overview of the entire proposal, you're well on your way, because most projects will want some kind of a summary because they want to report the good works that everybody's going to be doing for them. You know, like, we're going to accomplish our goals because we've got, you know, this organization, or this individual doing these projects for us. It's helping those people who are getting the money, and it's going to help us achieve our goals. Then probably the largest part of your grant is going to be your project narrative. And if you think back to when you were in high school and you were writing term papers and things like that, I think some of this terminology will sound very familiar. It'll be a flashback for all of us that, you know, you want to start with an introduction, then you want to describe your situation and why it's an issue where you are, and then you're going to want to outline what steps you're going to take to fix the problem, or to mitigate the situation, or to address the causes of it. And then you're going to want to be able to prove to the funder how you'll know that you achieved success. So they're going to want outcomes, and they're going to want something that is measurable. So that could be how many people you reached. It could be how many widgets you made. But they're going to want something that documents. They're going to want numbers behind an outcome. And then they're going to want you to be able to evaluate your program, to have a way that you can say, we're going to critically assess the project that we did, and this is what we're going to do to know that we achieved success. So a real easy example of that would be if you've been to workshops or conferences, especially with extension, you may be asked to fill out some kind of a post-event report, or after the workshop, fill out, you know, they may call it an evaluation. You know, those terms vary, but they want to know what, you know, did you learn what they wanted you to learn during that workshop, or did they fall short of the mark? Or, you know, maybe you learned something that they didn't think they were teaching, or, you know, you picked up on something that they said that maybe in a way that they hadn't meant, and it sets them up for even more funding, because it's like, oh yeah, people need this and this and this. So more than ever now, funders want evaluation. They want to know that you know whether or not you're hitting your mark. With the SARE program, we like to say that even if you don't achieve all the goals that you thought you were going to, you know, as long as you do the work that you thought you said you were going to do, you're learning something. And that's kind of what that evaluation is what did you learn as the recipient of those grant funds, and what did the people you were working with learn? And they may learn something completely different than you thought you were teaching them, but it's okay, because that in and of itself is a learning experience. You know, like, well, we thought we were teaching them about bananas, and actually, you know, we talked so much about citrus fruit that they think they learned about oranges. And, you know, it is what it is. You know, the results of what you're doing are the results. So report them regardless of whether or not your hypothesis was proven true or not from how you spelled out your problem in the proposal. Another big component, so after that project narrative, which has all the meat of the writing part in it, you're going to have to submit a budget. And, you know, you need to make sure that the numbers add up. A simple budget would be just, you know, budget in like what it would look like on a spreadsheet with a line item, and then what you're going to spend for it. And then most grants, if not all, will ask for budget justification. And that's where you go into quite a lot of detail about how and why you're spending the money the way you are. You know, it's like, we need X number of part-time employees to do this, and then spell out what projects they're going to do. They're going to do this and this and this and this and this, and they're going to spend this many hours, and we're going to pay them this much an hour, you know, or we need to buy playground equipment, and we need these pieces of playground equipment, and they're going to cost this much, and it's going to cost this much to install them. I mean, you can go into quite a lot of detail, and typically there are not word limits on a budget justification. Be sure to check that, but you've got to be able to explain. So just a line item with a number is probably not gonna result in a successful application, because the funder wants to know exactly how you're spending their money. So we're going to distill this down into a top 10 now and try to get this message through quickly that way. And I think this top 10 is not mine. I actually stole this from the Michael Fields Agricultural Institute. I think I may have modified it a bit, but I really liked it. And I'm so old, I'm a fan of those old top 10 everythings that used to be on late night TV. So one is determine if this is the right grant for you. So make sure your idea fits the program priorities. And by that, I mean, there are multiple grant programs out there, and there are more ideas for projects than there are funding sources probably. But you know, every idea that we have for a grant doesn't fit every single grant program. So you have to do a little bit of searching and make sure that what you want to do, what you need to do, and what this funder wants and needs, that they line up pretty well. And sometimes you have to think a little bit outside the box. And an example that I'll give you is a group I used to work with in Parsons, Kansas. They used a grant. This is a community gardening grant. They wanted to get folks started in gardening. And so they found, and again, this wasn't an individual, it was a nonprofit organization. So keep that in mind, but they were going to promote community gardening, and they found a grant program through the federal government. I don't know what department it's in, I forget now, but it was a recreation grant. And they said, aha, community gardening could be recreation. They were going to work with people who had physical and mental disabilities. So they said, you know, gardening is a good way for their clients to get exercise. And so they couched the community garden project, building up a community garden in a donated plot of land from next to a church, as recreation. And oh, by the way, they might just make some money at it because they'll have these fruits and vegetables from their community garden that they can sell. And that's another way that our clients who have disabilities or physical limitations could make some money for themselves and help support their families. And lo and behold, it was successful. But I wouldn't have ever put those dots together and said, oh my gosh, yeah, gardening as recreation. But it is, you know, when you think about it, it's very physical. So it works. So make sure the grant is right for you. And if you're really determined to do it, think outside of your own box and see if there's a way that you can still accomplish what you want to do and meet the funder's priorities without getting too twisted about it all. So read that call for proposals very carefully. I go through a call for proposals with a highlighter, and I highlight, deadlines, especially. I look for the deadline first. I look for the dollar amount second, and then I look for, what are the absolute criteria? Usually they're spelled out, either bullets or numbered. Make sure that you know exactly what the funder is looking for, and plan ahead. It's it's easy for me to say that. The planning ahead is a lot harder to do, because if you find a grant, a call for proposals that's just perfect for a project that you have going and it's due in 30 days, it's a little hard to plan way ahead. But if you've got that idea in your head, you already knew it, so you've already got some of that grant written, just not on paper yet or in the computer, it's in your head. So but be sure you think through all the details as best you can with as much time as you have, because again, planning ahead is easy to say, it's a little harder to do when you're searching for grants and up against deadlines. And then when you do start writing, we're not writing War and Peace here, a novel which I have never read because it's far too long. And it's not a mystery novel. Excuse me for a second. There must be a fire warning. I'm getting notices on my phone. Sorry. But keep the writing simple, and it's for your benefit too. Explain what you're doing in terms that you are comfortable with and familiar with. This is not, it's not a PhD dissertation. You don't have to use words that, you don't have to go to the thesaurus and use words that you don't normally use in everyday conversation. And I say this, for a lot of reasons. One, it's going to be a lot easier for you to write the grant if you're writing the way you would tell someone about the project that you're doing. And secondly, remember that several human beings are going to read this. I mean, real people are writing these grants and real people are reading these grants. And so think about your writing from the perspective of those reviewers, and you want to be as clear as possible. You want to write comfortably so that you can be direct and get to your point quickly, but do it in a way that makes sense to you and is clear to you, and that and then think about it from the reviewer's perspective, or have someone review for you before you submit, and make sure that it's written clearly enough. And I think all of us can fall into that trap of thinking, we know the project we want, we know it so well that we don't always explain it well enough. But we're also limited with words. Most grants will have word limits, so keep that in mind. But keep it simple, or as simple as you can. Make sure, I touched on this when I talked about evaluations, but make sure that you have a way to measure your results, some way that you will know whether or not you accomplished or how close you got to accomplishing what you expected to accomplish. And then a timeline. So the reviewers want to know how this project works logically. So timelines are very important, and it really does help a reviewer to understand how your project is going to progress from the beginning to the end. If you've got a very well-established timeline, or like the text here says, even a visual timeline. You can go that far if you've got enough space to say, these 2 months, it's a 12-month project. So the first 2 months we're going to do this, the second 2 we're going to do this, the second 2 we're going to, the third 2 we're going to do this, and this is how we're going to finish it out. So always make sure that makes logical sense, and that each step naturally follows the other. And more and more and more, number 7 is involve other groups and people who have skills that complement yours. More and more and more funders are looking for this collaboration or cooperation among organizations or individuals or groups of individuals, and bringing in partners for your grant that can help you accomplish pieces of the grant that maybe you don't have all the expertise for, but they do. And it's a feel good for everybody. I mean, we all work better in teams, I think, and the funder knows that they are impacting a whole lot of folks. So when it's possible and when it makes sense, pick some partners that will really help you meet your goals. So think about how you're going to share excuse me, how you're going to share what you learned. Again, that's another important component is, most of these funders want some publicity out of the project that they're funding. They want folks to know that they are helping with this project, and you want people to know what you've done with that funding. And so make sure that you're able to articulate how you're going to share. So we call that an outreach plan, and how you're going to share what you learned with other people, whether it's the general public or other people in the same industry that you're in. Just have a plan and be sure you can articulate that. Make sure your budget's realistic, and that justification is very important. And then follow the directions from the RFA to the letter. I mean, absolutely. All the rules are usually in that request for proposals. And it's very important that you follow every single rule. I heard this just recently from a fellow with USDA who I review grants for. And he said, he goes, so many people have great ideas and they don't follow our rules. And he said, it's very hard to evaluate those proposals because it's hard on the reviewers, because even if a reviewer recognizes that, yeah, this is a really good idea, if you don't follow all the rules, they're evaluating you based on those rules. And there's really not a lot of room to color outside the lines with a grant. The rules are the rules. And so make sure that you're following, word limits, any direction that says, you can't do this or you can't do that, don't do it. And if they ask you for specific pieces, like they want a timeline, a visual timeline, make sure that you've got some sort of a visual timeline in there. Some of them want logic models. We'll touch on that later if we get to it, but make sure that that you're following their rules. And if you have questions, ask. I don't know of any funder who isn't willing to answer questions from potential applicants. That just goes without saying. They want applicants for their programs, so they will answer. There's usually a point person or people who you can contact if you have any questions about the call for proposals, and you can ask as many questions as you want. So that is very, very important. So let's see how we're doing time-wise. So these are just a few more of my little tips. Avoid jargon. Explain if you're using acronyms or terminology that may be may be unique to your business or your project. Make sure you explain the terms. Just be real, be a human. We're all human, and stories about real people resonate with other people. So don't be afraid to use real world situations, because that's what it's all about. We're trying to solve real problems with these grants. Be positive, be concise, follow the rules, and be realistic. A $50,000 grant is not going to solve world hunger, most likely. So be very realistic while you're being human. Just be realistic, and those will work. And then ideally, if you have someone who is a trusted friend, who is not afraid to give you honest feedback, and you have to be unafraid to take that honest feedback from, let them review your grant before you submit. and let them tell you, oh my gosh, I didn't understand this paragraph at all. What are you trying to say? And don't take it personally. And you say, oh, well, this is what I meant. But I guess I didn't say it. So, that is an ideal situation, but it doesn't always happen. We don't always have that person. So we're going to get to this. So why do proposals not get funded? Well, sometimes it was a bad match. You tried maybe too hard to match. You didn't explain what was going on. You had a scope that was too large or too small. You have a budget that doesn't match what you put in the proposal, or your budget was out of line, as too high for what you were trying to accomplish, or maybe it was too low. It's like, yeah, I get what they're trying to do, but they're trying to do too much with too little money. It's impossible for them to do that. If you're trying to pull something like that off, then you're going to have to explain that in your project narrative, how you're doing a lot with just a tiny bit of money. Show that you know the subject that you're proposing to work in, and or that you have partners who will help you with that subject matter. So what else can go wrong? You didn't follow the rules. You didn't have all the criteria. You missed a deadline. You didn't write clearly, or your project, you went over the word limits, or you were so short with your narrative that you didn't explain everything, and the funders didn't, the reviewers didn't understand. And maybe the qualifications of the people you have on staff are not appropriate. If you need some type of a medical professional, for example, and there's no medical professional on staff or provided for in the grant program, then it's going to be a little hard to accomplish. So this is the part that everybody wants to get to, is, where do you look for grants? Grants are those funds that don't have to be repaid. They're not a loan. they're grants. Well, the SARE program, Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education, is one program that offers money directly to farmers. And they have a grant program that is called a Farmer Rancher grant. So that's one source. The United States Department of Agriculture, the Rural Development Program, has a farmer direct grant called a value added producer grant. If you are doing something on your farm or with a product from your farm that is adding value to it, you may qualify for these rural development grants. And our rural development office in Kansas is pretty thorough, and they will help walk you through the grant proposal and help you meet the criteria of that value-added producer grant. You're not just kind of on your own. If you happen to be a veteran, the Farmer Veteran Coalition, a national organization, has a fellowship fund where they fund several grants a year to help veterans get started in farming, or expand their farming, or just continue to farm. You can always look at the federal government site, grants.gov, but grants to individuals are difficult to find. If you're looking on behalf of an organization or a business or your work, it might be a better source, but it's always worth a shot. And then there are charitable foundations, and Kansas has quite a lot of community foundations, and sometimes most all of them offer grants of some sort for this, that, and the other thing. It may not fit your idea, but it's worth looking at them. And there is a website that I've got on here that's, let me see, I've got the laser pointer so you can see that. TCGI, that stands for the, I was thinking it was the Grantsmanship Center, but that's what it is. Now I don't remember what the initials are, but you can search this tcgi.com, and you can find a page that has charitable foundations in the state of Kansas, and you might be able to find one that that fits whatever the project is that you're working on. It's a thought. And then there's alternative funding. So there's a national organization called Slow Money. We used to have at least one active chapter in Kansas. I don't know that they're active anymore, but it's local funding, but it's kind of face-to-face funding. I think they call themselves Beatcoin now, and you can search that online and see if you can get some traction there. Sometimes people roll their eyes, and this is a webinar, so I can't see all your faces and I can't see you rolling your eyes. But I still don't. I see all the different fundraisers that come through my social media, and some of them are good, and some of them not so good. But I look at a lot of them, and I don't think we can quite discount crowdsourcing for certain types of funding. If you've got a really good story, it's possible. So there's that. And then there is an organization that just started up in the last 4 or 5 years called Farm Raise. They will help you search for multiple funding sources. They do some free work, and then they also do some fee-based work. But it's a bunch of young people. In fact, one of them used to work for the SARE organization when she was in college. And so got familiar with a lot of different funding sources. Some of them are sources that you can find for yourself, but it's certainly worth talking to them. And again, you can just search Farm Raise, and I think you can find them. I have talked to a couple people who've used them. One fellow who told me he actually paid to get some help, and he wasn't completely disappointed. I don't know that he got funding that he wanted, but he thought it was worth it. I've talked to others who didn't, but they're out there. So the SARE program has a state coordinator in every state. That's me in Kansas, but there's one in every single state and island protectorate if you've got friends out there. And we can help with grants. We can't write the grants for you, especially not a SARE grant, because that's our program, but we can sure be that person who gives you feedback. There's the Michael Fields Agricultural Institute. They offer free service to farmers in the entire North Central region, and Kansas is part of that region. And the SARE program gives them some funding to provide this grants advising, and they can also help you find grants that might fit. So if you've got an idea and you can't find a grant that fits it, they might be able to help you. And again, that's free, and it's michaelfields.org is where you look for them. And then also, I don't want to discount our small business development centers. We have them all over the state of Kansas, and a grant proposal is very much like a business plan. So I wouldn't, if you've got an idea and it's a business, like if it's your farm, and or maybe has something to do with value added, check out the resources at the Small Business Development Center, because that might be an option for you. And then this just a little more in depth about the Michael Fields Ag Institute, and I've given you the name of their grants advisor. Sometimes that changes. I had a document I was going to put in the chat, but I realized it had the wrong grants advisor on it, so I put it into a slide instead. But their grants advisor is Ren Almitra, and her address is grants@michaelfields.org. And even if you're just curious, definitely check out the Michael Fields Institute, because they do have quite a few resources, and they've got a lot of grant writing resources. I have used a lot of their work as tips, and it informs presentations like this. So, looks like we've got about 10 minutes left. Are there any? I'm looking to see anything come through the chat. Are grants taxable? Very good question. Yes, if they go to an individual. So it's another, I have notes on my tablet here about things that are not in my PowerPoint that I've been thinking about a lot lately. And one of them is this taxes and the consequences of receiving a grant. So for example, a SARE farmer rancher grant, a grant that goes directly to you, the individual as a farmer, it is considered income, and the SARE organization will submit what, a 1099, I believe. So they're going to report that to the IRS, and so you're going to have to report this as income. Now, through the course of the grant, probably a lot of what you're spending the grant money on, may be, things that you're using on the farm, like seeds and I'm trying to think of eligible expenses for a SARE grant that would be considered agricultural expenses. Certainly, SARE allows you to claim some salary because you're the farmer and you're doing all the work, and so you should be paid for what you're doing, and that's an allowable expense, certainly. So, but you do have to think about that when you apply for grants. If you're applying for them as an individual, there will be some tax consequences. You may need to talk to your your tax preparer or your financial planner, or somebody at the bank who knows a little bit about taxes. But thank you for bringing that question up, because that was something that I wanted to mention, is that there could be some tax consequences, but you're also using some of that money on bona fide farm expenses. So I don't believe that all of the entire grant would be taxable. Now, if it's a grant that, say KBFA, Kansas Black Farmers Association, gets a grant to, do programs, and I'm speaking about SARE now. So a SARE grant to, do some program, to do some on-farm demonstrations. Certainly they can use that grant money to pay a farmer. As a nonprofit, that money's not going to be taxable to the organization. They pay Farmer Joe to host a field day and experiment with some alternative crops on the farm. Then what they pay that farmer would be taxable technically, I think. Now I'm thinking about it a little harder. It probably would be. It would be worth reporting, but it's just the money that goes, in the form of salary, not anything that farmer would have spent on, that Farmer Joe would have spent, like on seed or something like that. But it's something we always need to think about, is the tax consequences of all of this.
And if you guys can't see the chat, perhaps you're on the phone or something, feel free to message either Lonnie, myself, or Kerri, and we'll make sure your question gets answered.
Yeah, so I think we'll let's look at the SARE program real quickly. I'm gonna the SARE program the SARE program has been around since 1988. It was authorized by the federal, or by the Farm Bill, and that's where the funding comes from, funded by USDA. But it works a little differently than the agency itself, in that SARE is more of a ground up organization, where a lot of the decision making is done by farmers and nonprofit organizations, as opposed to kind of a top down thing where administration says you're going to do this, you're going to do that. We take direction from the farmers in our region, and so it makes it a little more of a grassroots component of the USDA. Kansas is in the north central region. You can see on the screen, it's kind of that golden brownish area. It's 12 states that go from North Dakota down to Kansas and over to Ohio. If you're familiar with extension national regions, it's the same 12 states that are in the north central region for extension work. But again, this is kind of redundant, but Each region, there are 4 SARE regions, have regional councils that set their priorities, and that's where the farmers come in. We've got farmers on those regional councils. We've got non-governmental organizations on those regional councils. On the North Central Region AC, Dr. Zelia Wiley sits on that, on our advisory committee. We call it the AC, as does Donna Pearson McClish, I believe, is on the committee as well, as on the advisory committee as well. So Kansas is lucky we have 2 representatives there. But SARE prides itself on the outreach it produces. You know, if you recall that I talked a little bit about outreach, how are you gonna tell people what you're doing? Well, when you get a SARE grant, what SARE does with that is they turn that into bulletins and books that we can share with farmers and interested people all over the country. So that's why that the outreach is very, very important. It's getting the information that we learn out to the people, because we're using federal tax dollars to do this. So we want to make sure that people benefit from it. And everything we do is couched with sustainable agriculture, and that sustainability is a term that a lot of people use and a lot of people interpret differently. So it's important to know this is one of the nuances. You know, when you're applying for a grant, you need to know who the funder is and fit your grant to their mission, or make sure that your proposal fits their mission. And so with a SARE grant, you're going to want to make sure that your project can fit their model of sustainability, which is profitability, or on the slide it says economic viability, but profitability for farmers over the long term. That's very important to sustain agriculture in the United States, as is environmental stewardship of our air, our land, our water, and then quality of life. That's the community benefit component. How does the rural community, how do other farmers and ranchers, and how do our rural communities benefit from the project that you are proposing for SARE? So it's very important that you be able to document how you meet, how your project is going to help SARE meet those 3 objectives for sustainability. And so again, I go into almost ad nauseum, but we do value farmers. Farmers and ranchers are involved in every single component of the SARE program. It is truly a ground up or a grassroots governed organization, and we're very proud of that. And we're very proud of the fact that we're able to offer grant funds directly to farmers. So, you know, one of the questions you may have in your mind is, so what kind of projects are funded? And so just a few, and some of these are not all on the slide, but for example, past farmer rancher grant recipients have focused on agroecology, agroforestry, cover crops, beneficial insects, pollinator habitat, poultry, small scale livestock, permaculture, organic agriculture, quality of life issues for rural families and communities, regenerative ag, renewable energies. I think I did soil health already, but you know, crop diversity, food sovereignty, land access. I mean, you can see the list is, that's not an exhaustive list at all, because sustainable agriculture covers the whole gamut of agriculture, and we look at it in a very holistic way. So that's kind of important. And so another question that maybe you have in your minds is, you know, so okay, so yeah, there's funding. So, you know, what kind of funding? You know, how do I access these programs? And so this is a look at the 6 programs that North Central Region SARE has. We've got research and education grants. Those are the biggies. If you want to submit a research and education grant, you're going to be competing against universities and some pretty heavy hitters, university researchers. It can be done, but I'm telling you, that's the hardest grant to get. The success rate is probably about 5%. We have professional development grants. Those are for proposals that focus on on helping professionals who work with farmers develop and improve professionally. So something that they need. In Kansas a few years ago, the Kansas Rural Center had a professional development grant to help NRCS employees understand high tunnel production. It was like 10 years ago when high tunnels were new in Kansas, and NRCS was offering their EQIP. They had their high tunnel program, but nobody knew what a high tunnel was or how you grew in it. And so we had a nonprofit organization that funded that. There's a partnership grant where a ag professional works with 3 or more farmers. Then there's, of course, this farmer rancher grant that I think a lot of you might be interested in tonight. Up to $15,000 for one farmer, or up to $30,000 for 2 or more farmers to experiment with some sustainable practice on your farm. SARE offers graduate student funding and also youth educator grants, and that's a highly underutilized grant program. So if you've got some youth programs, it only goes up to $6,000, but I think everybody here could do a lot with $6,000 when it comes to teaching young people about agriculture. So that one's always on the table. And this is what it looks like. Money coming back to Kansas. Since 1988, $5.3 million, 190 grants, and 108 of those have been farmer rancher grants. So they may not be the biggest grants in the world, but they do, you can be successful with a farmer rancher grant, I guess is what I'm saying, is it's not completely out of the realm. So these are funds, again, they go directly to farmers. It's good to link with an ag professional. They say university or nonprofit partners, and those are usually your best bets. And in this 12-state region, they fund about 40 of those a year. So again, it's not out of the question that these grants are very much attainable. So now, do we have any questions? We're at an hour, so. I can talk and talk and talk, but I don't want to keep folks here much longer, but
I'm still not seeing any questions as of now, Kerri.
okay.
I was always told that's a sign that you've explained everything exactly.
Yeah, right.
I guess that's what they try to say to make me feel
That's
better.
what they try
That's
to
what I
say.
was
Yeah, I was going to get to this last slide here with my name on it. So the bottom line is, there's a bunch of slides that I skipped, but it's because you can access them online at the SARE website. There is a recorded video of all about how to apply for a SARE grant that goes through all of these last slides. And I thought if we only wanted to talk about that, there we go. So the Farmer Rancher Grant for SARE is coordinated by Joan Benjamin, and she works at Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri. Joan is very, very, very accessible and loves to answer. She knows more, she's forgotten more about the Farmer Rancher Grant program than I think I will ever know. She's very good. And so if you have questions about the Farmer Rancher Grant, you're welcome to go straight to her as the regional coordinator for it. And you're always welcome to call me to ask questions about it, or email. Either way is you can get a hold of me. So I encourage you to think about a Farmer Rancher Grant. The part that I didn't tell you was all SARE grants are on a cycle, on a 12-month cycle. So those Farmer Rancher grants, the call for proposals will be released in August or late July, early August every year, with a deadline that'll be usually the first Thursday in December. So they give you a few months to think about it. And after the call for proposals comes out. So we're not quite ready yet. When that call for proposals come out, I will push it. It'll be pushed out through KBFA channels to everybody. And at that point, if there's a need to focus in, or, you know, if you all want some one-on-one help, or if you're interested in getting started early and you want some one-on-one help, or if we need to host and do another one of these webinars, we certainly can. But that's kind of the timeline that you're looking at with Farmer Rancher grant. There'll actually be 4 of those 6 grants that'll be due from October to December. And that would be the partnership grant, the research and education grant, the youth educator grant, and the Farmer Rancher grant. Those are all due in the fall of the year. So thank you very much for hanging in there with me and listen to me ramble and ramble and ramble about grant writing.
You're not rambling, Kerri. You're not rambling.
Sometimes I feel like I am.
No, not at all. This is a lot of valuable information. And we have this recorded, so we will have it posted on our KBFA YouTube channel. Also, once we get it posted, we will share via social media, probably cut up a few clips and everything too. So we will have you tagged in that, Kerri. But like I said, a lot of valuable information, and I'm certain we'll be reaching out once those grants open up for SARE also. So
I love to see grants come in from Kansas. I love it. And I get really upset when they don't get funded. I'll tell you up front, they don't all get funded. No. And it's nothing personal. SARE gets a lot of really good grants because there are just a lot of really good farmers in the North Central region. Yeah. What can I say? But I love to see I love to see what everybody's got going on their farms. And if you've got a great idea for a project, let SARE help you with some of the financing. I mean, it's tough out there. I know it is. We all know it is. And so it's worth a try. It takes a little bit of time, but it's certainly worth a try.
Definitely. Justin, do you have any words that you'd like to add here as we get ready to wrap?
Just gratitude. I'm just thankful that we're able to help get this resource to our farmers, and just thankful to Kerri for being willing again to take the time and even meet with us late to get this information out. It definitely didn't ramble to me. It was very concise, on point, and, very valuable. So again, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And also thank you for making yourself available. And as from experience, you do give really great feedback. So I say tap into that. And it's only upward projection. So that's all I have, Lonnie.
All right. Well, Kerri, I want to do one final thank you again. We know it's late. You didn't have to do this, but we're glad that you were willing to, and just kind of peep into the behind the scenes. When we reached out to Kerri, she was very happy, very excited about doing this. So a lot of good information, as we said. Kerri, you're a valuable resource to KBFA, and we just thank you for all that you've done. Thank you for this grant writing webinar, as well as your help with the January meeting as well. So just wanted to, like Justin say, show gratitude. And with that, if we don't have any other questions, I will go ahead and end this webinar now. So like I said, thank you again, Kerri. Thank you everyone for joining us. And we will be sending out the recording here pretty shortly. All right. Well, y'all have a good one. Enjoy your day. And we will see you guys next time for KBFA webinar series.